Hi everyone, so today we're making these super cute DIY cottagecore kind of style hairbrushes. And this was my inspiration from Pinterest that I saw. And another photo of inspiration. And the first video you saw was the hairbrushes that we create on this day. So it's super inexpensive, and I made one for my sister as well as a gift, so they're great to make as gifts. So all the equipment you'll need is I bought a bamboo hairbrush off of Amazon, and that was $6.99. I bought 2 of those. And then I went to the range, but if you already have paint, you wouldn't need to worry about this. So I bought some paintbrushes because I didn't have them. A paintbrush set was, I think it was $2.99. And then I bought these acrylic paints, which were $4.99, which did the job. And I also bought some Mod Podge to seal it. But if you had sealant, you could use whatever sealant you want. And I think that was £5 from Hobbycraft. But you can also get that on Amazon. So the first thing I did, well, before this I actually traced in my designs onto a piece of paper just to get the idea of what I wanted. But then the first thing I did with the actual hairbrush is I drew my design on it in pencil just onto the hairbrush. Well, I drew the outline, first of all, of the kind of frilly part to go around the outside. So excuse my Barbie pyjama trousers, but I just wanted to be comfortable because this actually took a couple hours to do both the hairbrushes. Obviously they had to set and everything in between. So I start off with this light blue colour, and I go around the edges to create this frilly pattern. It took me a couple coats to get quite a good thick layer of this acrylic on. Again, it probably depends on the quality of your acrylics, but I found that these worked just fine. But you just had to do a couple coats to make sure that it looked good, the frilly pattern. So I'll just speed that up. So there you can see the finished pattern, which is my outside edge. You can do this at the end as well. I did, for this brush I did it first and then did the inside, and then the other one I did the inside first and then the outside. So for the one with the blue edge frills around the edge on the outside, that one's going to be a landscape. And then for the other one, I'm doing kind of a teddy bear on the inside. So that one's a little bit different for my sister because she really likes teddy bears and stuff. I think the landscape does look maybe more cottagecore kind of style, but I think if you did like a swan or something, it looks super elegant. So for the base of this one, I mixed together this kind of peachy colour with a little bit of pink and some white. And I use that as my kind of background colour for it, and then I do an oval background, and then I do the teddy bear on top for that. Again, I had to do a few layers of this, and just letting it dry a little bit in between to get a good base. So once I'm at the colour I like, I leave it there, and I draw on with a pencil my oval background, and then I start painting it. So for this one, like I said, because it's just a background colour to a teddy bear, I want it to be quite a neutral base colour, and I want to go quite pinky on this one. So yeah, I've just got this light pink, and then I do a darker pink outline as you saw in the beginning video. So yeah, right now I'm just colouring in the oval that I drew. So I'll speed up through me just painting on this background. So a couple coats later, you can see I'm at this nice pink base ready for me to draw my teddy bear onto. So I let that dry and then I'll come back to it and then I work on the blue one again. So it's useful working on two because it means you can work on them between. So now I'm drawing on my background, or like my landscape, for the background of this blue one, or like the main section of this blue one. And I kind of just draw on roughly where I want the fields to be and where a couple of trees are. I don't draw on too much detail. I think if you're doing one of these, it has to be quite abstract because they're just quite small and a little bit tricky to paint on at times just because the shape of them. So it's easier just to go for kind of something more abstract, which is what I did. So I mixed up a green colour. I used some green and some blue, I believe, or just two different greens. And I mix them up and then I start painting on my background. So my hills I start off with. So I start off with the one in the foreground and then work backwards. I'm definitely not a professional at painting by any means. I'm not very good. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it. So I wanted a flower field at the front, so I start off with kind of this green base, and then I work on creating flowers for it. So once I've painted on a fair few flowers in the foreground, I move back to my pink one and let that one dry. So on the pink brush, I'm drawing on the teddy now, a rough outline of where I want the teddy to be, and then I'll start painting it. So once I got to a kind of creamy brown shade that I liked, I started painting. So yeah, I start filling the bear in with this lighter brown colour in the areas that I want to be brown. I leave kind of the paws and the snout or like nose area. And then I go around and outline the areas that I want to be darker and shadowed with this darker brown. So you'll be able to see in a second where I kind of outline certain parts, like around the paws there at the bottom and around the edges, and I kind of blend that in. So this is it kind of fully outlined. You can see that the nose area, the ears and the paws are still quite light. And then I use the black as well to create kind of the nose and everything, so that you can see what I've done so far. So I still need to add some of the last touches, but that's that. So then I set that aside and let that dry, and then I can come back to my landscape and work on the rest of the hills and my trees and stuff. So I add some more flowers to the foreground, and then I start on my other hills, and I use slightly darker green for the rest of the hills. So I use the darker green around the bottom to show kind of the distinction between them. And then I also use some yellow to do some highlights on it. Then after that I start working on the sky and the sunset. So I use a kind of light blue, purplish in shade, and I go down and I kind of fill in all of the gap between the top of the mountains or hills that I've created and the outline of the blue outline. And I start off with quite a light blue and then I slowly add in some other colours. So you can see on my palette I also had like pink next to it near. So this is the background all filled out with the blue. So I start reaching for this pinky bluey colour to create the sunset around the bottom. And then I use some yellow towards the bottom as well to create the sunset over the hills. Then I start creating clouds using a deeper bluey kind of purpley colour over the rest of the sky and kind of making them look fluffy. And then I'll add some more tones to them. Then I come back to the landscape and start working on some of the other key features, like the tree. So I use a really dark green, mix it with a bit of dark brown, I believe, or black. And I create my trees in sort of a shadowy way, just kind of fluffy triangles. And I do those next to the hills. And I also create kind of a bush line going across the hills as well. I do also go back and add a few flowers overlapping kind of where the hills meet from before. And then here's kind of what I created so far, and then I just needed to come back to do the final touches later on that day. So I go back over the blue border again, just to make sure it's nice and thick and pigmented. Then I move on to creating the initial at the bottom. So I do an M for me, and then I do Jess for my sister on the other one. And I looked at kind of calligraphy print, and I use my pencil to do that. And then I outline the outline for the other hairbrush with my pencil as well. So I used a brighter pink for the outline of this one, so I just add a little bit of white to the bright pink, and then I also do the bow on the bear in the same colour, so I use the lighter pink and then the bright pink to create the outline as like a shadowing effect because it's slightly darker. So same thing on this one, I'm just writing Jess onto the handle. Because Jess is a shorter name, it was easier to fit it on, so I could do her full name. So here I'm coming in with the brighter pink, just to make it more clear. Obviously, depending on the size of your paintbrush, it's a bit trickier to try and do such a small line on it versus the rest of the painting. So then I leave that to dry and move on to the blue one. I'm doing this handle. And this time I'm using the same lightish blue that I used for the outline on the blue one. And like I say, this time I'm just doing an M, so it's a little bit easier. So here you can see them all finished off. Add a dot to the end of both of them in the end. So I've got the dress and the M and the painting all done. And then last thing to do is seal it. So wait until the next day. And I get this Mod Podge. I have it in matte, but you can also get it in gloss, so that it just depends on your preference. And all I need to do for this is just paint it over. So I start with going around the edges quite carefully. You can't really see it on the hairbrush, so you don't need to worry about being too careful about going around the edges. But I just wanted to make sure I had fully covered all the frilly edges so that it doesn't chip off from general use. Again, the using the Mod Podge is an optional kind of step in the process, because if you aren't planning on using the hairbrush, if you just want it for display use, then you don't necessarily need to seal it. But if you do plan on using it as an actual hairbrush, then definitely you'll want to seal it, because it will easily chip off otherwise. But with it on, I'd say it could last you quite a while, as long as you're not putting it under like the heat of the hairdryer or anything like that. So I just paint it all over and let it dry. Again, also, if you want it to last quite well, you can do more than one layer. So depending on how well you want it to last, you can make it a bit thicker of a layer too. And underneath you can see the designs that I drew originally. And then I'm also just painting it over the name, just to make sure that doesn't chip off either. So I do that for that one, and then I do the same for the other hairbrush as well. Also draw a nice little water heart whilst waiting for it to dry, of course. And this can take a little while to set. I'd say leave it at least 24 hours before you touch it. It dries within an hour, but it takes a while to properly set to the point where it won't kind of chip off. So I'm just doing the exact same process on the blue hairbrush with the landscape. It does change the look of them slightly, but I think it's worth it if you do want to use the hairbrush, because like I say, otherwise it will definitely chip off. But again, if you don't want to use a hairbrush, if you are just using it for display, then you wouldn't necessarily need to seal it. But once that's sealed and protected, you can get a pretty hair bubble on it or a bow, and here's the finished product. I absolutely adore them. I think they look really cute. They make doing your hair a bit more interesting. They feel more personalised, and I really like them. So I would definitely recommend giving them a go. I'll link the products I used below, and here's it in action. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you give it a go. Thank you. Bye.